Non-reconciliation with the community increases the risk of recidivism and offender remains alienated from the community. Where our courts have handed down sentences, justice must be served. We will never compromise our incarcerating offenders who have been sentenced to imprisonment by our courts. We are committed to create a safer and secure communities. Therefore, we will never sacrifice public safety, as we have made it our mission to securely incarcerate hardened criminals and those who are considered to be a danger to society. Our facilities, such as the recently opened CIMEX Correctional Center at Kgoshimompuru, the second management area in Tshwane, enables us to achieve some of these objectives. In our correctional facilities, there are offenders whose offenses range from serious and violent crimes to minor economic offenses. Some offenders, if they had the means to pay their fines, they will not even be in our correctional facilities. Our correctional facilities should therefore not only be seen as buildings to keep offenders away from society, but also as correctional centers that rehabilitate offenders through programs in order to integrate them back into their communities as law-abiding, responsible citizens. We have taken into consideration all the relevant facts that led to the incarceration of certain offenders. When offenders are placed at correctional facilities, individuals' correctional sentence plans are formulated for each and every one of them. These plans focus on the behavior of offenders, which must be corrected, and goals set which offender must complete for him and how to effectively be rehabilitated. Our correctional facilities have played a pivotal role to rehabilitate offenders. It is thus important that ex-offenders to utilize the second chance by means of plowing back into society through the skills that they will have acquired. Amongst our ex-offenders, we have successful business people and those who have found gainful employment in various sectors of the economy upon their release. Let me take this opportunity to congratulate one of the rehabilitated offenders, Blessing Goveni, for recently winning the Standard Bank Young Artist Award for Visual Arts and for the past and the future. Blessing Goveni spent 6 years in our correctional facility at Lokop, and that is where he found art through the Tsoga Wake Up Arts Project. He is a good example of a person who has grabbed his second chance upon release. His artwork is making waves across the globe. Yet there are also those who are released from correctional centers who tell us that they often experience discrimination, stigmatization, a denial of work opportunities, and prevention to participate in community structures. This contributes towards reoffending and does not help to participate in community structures. This contributes towards reoffending and does not help to integrate offenders into society. We call upon society to reconcile with these individuals and to play an active role as citizens to collectively reintegrate rehabilitated individuals. What are the ways of releasing offenders from our centers? There are various ways in which inmates can be released from our centers or from prison. One, a person has completed his or her sentence. Secondly, a person who is released on parole. People on parole are still under our supervision through community corrections. Thirdly, remissions of sentence. This is where the President uses the power vested on him by the Constitution and the Correctional Services Act to grant remissions, which effectively means cutting the sentence short of the offender. It also means it fast-tracks the dates upon which an inmate will be placed on parole, subject to meeting a set criteria. Medical parole is a release granted to offenders on medical or humanitarian conditions governed by the Correctional Services Act. A presidential pardon. The President can grant a pardon on various grounds to inmates inside and outside our centers. It should be noted that since 1994, a sitting president has not yet exercised his powers to grant a presidential pardon to a person inside our centers. But it does not mean it cannot happen. Each pardon is considered on its own merits and on its case. So it has not been done since 1994. All the pardons that the president has granted or any sitting president has granted were of people who are outside our centers. This power is visited upon on very exceptional circumstances and grounds. It is against this background that His Excellency President Cyril Ramaphosa has today, during the Day of Reconciliation commemoration in Bergville, KwaZulu-Natal, announced a decision to remit the sentence expiry dates of specific categories of sentence offenders, probationers and parolees, across all correctional facilities in the country. The decision taken by the President is in line with the established international practice and informed by the powers given to him by Section 84(2)(j) of the Constitution, which provides that the President is responsible for pardoning or retrieving offenders and remitting any fines, penalties, or forfeitures. Remission of sentence are not unique to South Africa. In recent months, we have seen countries like Thailand, Ghana, and Kenya using this as a policy tool to reduce the sentences of offenders who are deemed to have been rehabilitated. Remission also assists in alleviating overcrowding in our facilities. However, we must stress that remissions are not a solution to overcrowding. In addition, we continue to use our multi-pronged strategy on overcrowding, which includes, amongst others, improving corrections and development programs which the department to enhance the facilitation of rehabilitation that targets offending behavior and managing levels of remand detainees through the integrated justice system and its development committee, as well as various special subcommittees, including the intersectoral committee on child justice. Through policy reform, we will ensure that our criminal justice system does not criminalize poverty. Most of the people whose sentences will be remitted are individuals who could not afford to pay fine and a bail. Noted, overcrowding of correctional facilities is fueled by large numbers of remand detainees who cannot post bail, repeat offending by people who, because of their criminal records, cannot find work after their release, and by the overuse of short sentences. It is important to note that President Ramaphosa made the announcement while we are commemorating the days of reconciliation and also celebrating 25 years of democracy. This should remind all of us as the progress we have made as a nation and continue to make in promoting national unity and reconciliation in a democratic South Africa. Presidential remissions in South Africa were last exercised in 2012 when former President Jacob Zuma granted special remissions in celebration of Freedom Day on the 27th of April 2012, where a total of 45,033 offenders, 19,695 sentence offenders, and 25,338 in a project that 2012. On the 30th of May 2005, former President Thabo Mbeki also granted special remissions to 65,837 offenders, of whom 31,865 were sentenced offenders and 33,972 probationers and parolees, and they were released over a period of 3 to 9 months. Remissions were also granted on the 10th of May 1994 at the former President Nelson Mandela's inauguration, and again on the 27th April 1995 on the first anniversary of South Africa's freedom. It was again granted on the 18th of July 1998 on Mandela's 80th birthday. The previous remissions were granted to coincide with key national days, and this one is no different. In previous remissions, 2005, 0.24%, in 2012, 0.25%, less than 1% of the remitted individuals re-offended or again committed crime. South Africa's offender population as at the end of November 2019 is as follows: 163,015 across the country, 243 correctional centers for both sentence and remand detainees, 70,930 parolees and probationers under the system of community corrections. These are offenders who are no longer in correctional facilities but are already in communities. Therefore, this says that the total of offender population is 233,945. What should be noted is that more than two-thirds of 71.3% of the beneficiaries to be considered for the 2019 presidential review of sentence expiry dates are already in communities as parolees and probationers and not in correctional facilities. In terms of inmates within correctional centers, less than 10%, 8.99% of the total inmate population of 163,015 will be considered. Of those to be considered in correctional facilities, the greater part that is eligible for this remission is 14,647 inmates are closer to their parole consideration dates. Therefore, should they be granted parole, they will be released into the system of community corrections as parolees and will be closely monitored by correctional services officials until their sentence expiry dates. To this end, in 2019 Special Remission Project is targeted approximately 84.7% of probationers already in communities and not in correctional facilities, 11,556 out of the total probationers of 13,644. 48.98% of parolees already in communities and not in correctional facilities, 24,833 out of the total parolees of 50,700. 51.30% of the total community corrections population already in communities and not in correctional facilities, 36,389 out of the community corrections population of 70,930. 8.99% of South Africa's total inmate population in correctional centers, 14,647 out of the inmate population of 163,015, and less than one-third, 21.81% of South Africa's total offender population, 51,036 out of the offender population of 233,945. The following are the categories for the 2019 special remission. These special remissions of sentences will not be applicable to any sentence offenders, probationers, parolees, or day parolees who is serving for any of the sexual offenses, murder and attempted murder, armed robbery, certified as mentally ill and is detained in accordance with the Mental Health Act 2002, sedition, high treason, sabotage, and terrorism. Offenders declared as dangerous by the court in terms of Section 286A of the Criminal Procedure Act 51 of 1977, sentenced to life imprisonment. Any escaped absconded offender who evaded the justice system after being released on bail pending appeal and was still at large on the 16th of December 2019. Violations under the Domestic Violence Act 1998, child abuse. As a responsive government, we have deliberately excluded these types of offenses from the special remissions process because we understand the sensitivity they are carrying in our society. Offenders who are classified to be of low risk will receive an additional 12 months. Notable offenders for violence crime who have served almost the minimum required time for parole consideration will only be granted 12 months special remission. The process will include all justice, crime prevention, and security cluster departments, including the South African Police Service and the Department of Home Affairs, who will verify the details of every eligible offender. This process is estimated to run from the date of pronouncement by the President in a phased approach until a successful completion in order to ensure the smooth reintegration of offenders into society. And it is envisaged that the process will commence with the release of women, children, youth, and people with disabilities, and will then attendance of pre-release programs by offenders will also be a prerequisite before any release. Furthermore, sentenced offenders who may not have participated in other relevant programs will be prioritized for such pre-release programs before being considered for the release. The risk and relapse probability report is one of the key tools that is going to be utilized to assess and mitigate any risk associated with reoffending. The JCPS Cluster Technical Task Team has been established to focus, amongst others, on looking at the list of offenders who are foreign nationals. That technical task team will manage the review of the citizenship status to the foreign nationals to be done by the Department of Home Affairs, as well as verification of fingerprints and DNA analysis to be done by the South African Police Service. The process of granting these remissions of sentences will be fair, non-discriminatory, and transparent. The remissions are also done within the context of government's overall program of strengthening the criminal justice system. It is worth noting that South Africa has adopted the revision of the standard of minimum rules for treatment of prisoners, which are called the Nelson Mandela rules. This has enabled us to speed up transformation towards a people's developmental correctional system, consistent with various international principles and guidelines, and fully aligned to the UN and African human rights declarations and protocol. To give effect to these rules, the rehabilitation and social integration of South Africa's offender population is being accelerated across all correctional facilities. Its purpose is not only to punish, but to rehabilitate the offender, to protect the public, to promote social responsibility, and to enhance the human development of offenders in order to avoid repeat offending. In conclusion, Correctional Services has made significant strides in redefining the purpose of corrections in South Africa. We appeal to all South Africans to work together with the department to reintegrate offenders who will benefit from this special remissions process back into society. We acknowledge that it is often difficult and challenging to strike a balance between forgiveness and justice. According to a paper titled Forgiveness and Justice, published by Professor Worthington Everest et al., the following is observed. Most psychologists agree that forgiveness does not imply forgetting, condoning, or excusing offenses. Forgiveness does not necessarily imply reconciliation, trust, or release from a legal accountability. Instead, many psychologists contend that forgiveness involves a conscious decision, while acknowledging the seriousness of the wrong, to release or forgo bitterness and vengeance. The paper goes on to argue that, ideally, offenders will appreciate expressions of forgiveness, assuming that they acknowledge some responsibility for wrongdoing. Perpetrators may feel grateful to receive forgiveness, especially if forgiveness seems undeserved. The resulting feeling of gratitude or perhaps guilty at being over-benefited may motivate offenders to reciprocate the goodwill through improved behavior. Our stalwarts for freedom and democracy, Tata Nelson Mandela, once said, "In the end, reconciliation is a spiritual process, which requires more than just a legal framework. It has to happen in the hearts and minds of the people." Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. With that, colleagues, I would open for a row of 5 hands, and we'll take questions about the heart and minds of the people. Number 1, number 2.
It's the Minister of Justice there, Ronald Lamola, following through on what President Cyril Ramaphosa earlier announced, the fact that there will be a remission of sentences for certain classes of those who are behind bars, some who are on parole, and starting first with women, with children, with the youth, and those who are disabled in one way or another. So that is a process that will unfold over a period of time, and the details will become available as time progresses. We go back to that particular media briefing now to hear the questions that are being posed by various journalists and media houses.
Questions about 3. One of them relates to the judgment by the Gauteng High Court in Pretoria last week, which overturned your predecessor's decision, Michael Masuta, to grant parole for Janusz Wanush, saying that you need to go back and review this particular decision. As a man from the legal fraternity, can you honestly sit there and let your good conscience stand there and say that Janusz Wanush has not paid his debt to the country, whatever crime or sin that he may have committed? Should he be released on parole or not? What is your conscience saying about that? And are there any political connotations to him not being released on parole? Who has spent the past 2 years in prison and has been seeking presidential pardon from the Honorable President Cyril Ramaphosa, and also on the issue
Very relevant questions that are being asked there, and I'm sure that all of South Africa contemplating that. Who will be on that list of remissions? Will King Dalindyebo, will Khaya Tegesha, will Yalus Valus? We will go back to that just after this break.